I think it's time I returned to the barely started base I've neglected for the past 7 months. I completely reworked the layout, built a castle-inspired exterior, and started on the interior with a multi-level storage room. Something I've learned the hard way over the years is that trying to build a house from scratch is very difficult. It helps me immensely to first create a skeleton build to better guide me to the final shape that the build will take. This simply consists of a bunch of basic shapes connected in interesting ways. Though some of the shapes I built were essentially random, others were chosen for a specific purpose. Having an idea of the type of build I'm doing and any particular features I wanted to have informs me of the shapes that I may want to include in the skeleton build. For example, I knew that this build was going to be castle inspired and that I wanted it to include a large tower. To fit this tower into the skeleton, all I had to do was add a tall rectangular prism. My placement of the shapes is also intentional. I wanted to emphasize asymmetry in this build because it creates more visual interest. The layout I created for this build way back in the second episode was perfectly symmetrical, which is okay, but I decided to change it up. Before I could fill in the skeleton build, I needed to decide on a block palette. I really wanted to experiment with gradients on a larger scale since they look so good, and this was the perfect opportunity to do so. I chose a grayscale gradient because it's an easy place to start and it's easy to add color to in later steps. I also saw this as an opportunity to use an unusual block I've never built with before, coal ore. I've experimented with many new techniques and styles in this build so far in hopes of expanding on my building skills. Regardless of that though, it has been enjoyable getting out of my building comfort zone a bit lately. I started filling in the skeleton build by building a simple strip of each block in the gradient, going from darkest up to lightest. I slightly angled each strip to break up the straight lines and give the appearance of sunlight, creating shadows from a certain angle. I then blended the strips together by swapping random blocks along the edges. This step was a lot more time consuming than I was anticipating. It's a bit tricky to get gradients right by hand. I've been thinking of trying out the Axiom mod for these types of building problems, so maybe I'll test that out in a future build. I took care of some of the terraforming work next, which, in hindsight, should have been finished before I even started the build. I remember hearing about a guideline in building from a Gemini Tay video that suggests terraforming first, then building the main structure, and finishing with organics. I'd like to follow this guideline going forward because it would help me avoid a lot of potential issues with the build later in the process. I wanted to clear out the hills on either side of this build because they left very little space for a build this large to flourish. Since I didn't do all the terraforming work ahead of time, I'll need to do a lot more work later to smooth out the terrain all around the castle. The final thing I had to do to close in the building was the roof. This was the first and probably the biggest opportunity to add lots of color to the build. From the beginning, I had red and green in mind for the main colors of the build. I decided to make the roof mostly red and complement it with organics around the building later. I've been wanting to use mangrove wood in a build for a while now, and this was a great place to do so. Unfortunately, that also means I discovered how painfully slow it is to farm it. But continuing with the theme of using unusual blocks in this build, I chose netherrack to blend in with the mangrove planks. I then broke up the straight lines in the roof by adding slabs and trapdoors. To finish the roof, I came up with an ornate fence and fence gate design to add to the top. And to add a bit more variation, I decided to turn one part of the roof into a scouting platform instead of normal roofing. I'll be adding lots of intricate details later, but that finishes the exterior for now. Next, I cleaned up the interior and built a multi-layer storage room. Now that I had a closed-off interior to work with, I needed to clean it up to prepare for interior design. Seeing the exterior walls and roof from the inside was unappealing since they were both built with more distant viewing in mind. I chose to double wall the whole building to give a completely different look to the inside. Since you can only ever see the interior from close up, extensive texturing isn't necessary. I wanted to create a warmer feeling to the inside as the grayscale walls are very cold feeling. I chose spruce planks with the stripped dark oak trim, and I may add some stripped spruce later for minor texturing. The last part of the build I've completed so far is the storage room. This was a high priority for me because I've far outgrown my starter base's storage capacity and I was starting to lose track of items. I had no plan for the interior when I built the exterior, so it's kind of like a puzzle trying to figure out what rooms should go where. After a bit of thought, I chose to build the storage room in the back tower because I came up with a cool idea for it there. The idea was to have a ladder going up to different floors, each with its own storage category. As space is limited in this tower, I didn't want to build double floors, so I came up with a solution using slabs and trapdoors that I think adds a lot to the room. Finally, I filled in each floor with chests and decor. I used a lot of green for a pop of color and to match the color palette I chose for the outside. I also made a convenient way down from higher floors by hiding powdered snow under the moss carpet on the bottom floor. If you missed the last episode, click here to watch me build the ultimate librarian trading hall. Thanks for watching.